this.
Oh,
So I'm turning this on. Now that means I want to ask you to repeat those six
sure,
topics.
sure.
They're in the document that she sent out to us, Gary.
It's her.
Oh, it is. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So
Okay.
6 different workshops. I'll use the communication one as an example because it's kind of a more obvious one. So with communication, what happens is we basically say, and all the workshops are similar, right? When a missional coach goes out to give a workshop, it isn't about teaching someone how to be missional. It isn't about us pontificating about what might be good or what we think you should do. It's absolutely not a program. So it's not some kind of a book you're going to follow. But what it is every workshop starts with what are you already doing? So that's number one. What is already being done in the church, in the group, um, in regard to, let's say, communication, if we're talking about that workshop. So we're putting out a bulletin, we're putting out a newsletter, we have a website, etc. Right? What ways are we communicating personally? Right? So people come in the door. What kind of things are we doing for that? Then we work through a short scripture passage, and we discuss, well, what does God say about this? Right? What is Scripture telling us about communication? Then we come back to the places that they've just spoken about, and we say, okay, so we're already doing a newsletter. In what ways might that newsletter be missional? Right? In what ways are we assuming that there are seekers in our communication? So, for example, I could show you a lot of websites that are church websites that are so-called welcoming, except try to find what time the church service starts. So you see, there's an assumption there, right? That people that are not from the church really won't be looking at the website, right? If you look at a bulletin or the way we use our language in worship, right? We often assume that the people in the room are longtime Anglicans, right? We don't assume they're visitors. So we talk a little bit about what's happening there, what kind of things might we be able to tweak, right? And then the final step of it is really just to say, okay, let's pick one of those things, right? Let's pick one thing and just do that for a while, right? And then check back in 3 months or 6 months and see how is that shifting things. The most important thing in all of the workshops is a mindset. So it isn't about somehow plugging in a program and making something, suddenly everyone becomes missional, right? What it's about is everyone beginning to realize, oh, wait a minute, how would someone that's not from here interpret that? Right? And it doesn't mean we have to change theologically what we believe about Jesus or something. What it means is we begin to position ourselves in a way that says, oh, is that actually welcoming? That's interesting. I wonder about, what if we were to put the time here? Now, sometimes in some of these workshops, people have interesting ideas, right? And things like, for example, why don't we ask the neighborhood or ask somebody who doesn't go to church to look at our website? Not asking you to come to church, but what would you say if you saw this website? What would your first question be? And you'll get really good answers to stuff like that. Or show them your bulletin, right? Or show them other ways that you're doing things. There's so communication. If we were doing the communication workshop, we would say, what are you doing now for communication? There's usually a little kind of a homework piece just before the workshop. So we would give them a little sheet that says, where are you at in terms of what you're feeling about mission and evangelism and those kinds of words? What kinds of things are you already doing to communicate to people? And then we use those tools in the workshop. So we say, what are you doing? What does Scripture say? What's one thing you might tweak? And then let's check back. Let's make a plan and check back. That's essentially every single workshop has the same format. Does that all make sense so far?
Yeah.
Everybody?
And
Okay.
so I'm thinking because one of my questions, which I haven't stated yet, but one of my questions has always been for us wanting to look at this, what's the starting point? And I think you're saying the starting point would be to set up some workshops. And
Well, I actually was sorry, Gary. I would go back one step.
okay.
For us, it was about training missional coaches. So when we started this process, what I did personally was I literally went through and thought to myself, who are the kinds of people that already have a faith that's solid, right? That they're not wondering about what they believe. Who are people that are already comfortable talking about, oh yes, I prayed about that the other day, like just comfortable in the conversations around their faith. And people that are not going to, like the kinds of people that are going to be able to not pontificate about stuff, but actually soak in information and be able to share with others how to think more missionally. So I very specifically handpicked 30 people in the diocese. And then we did the foundational workshop, and then we walked them through how the other workshops work. We then created a team of which we now have 15. So like half of those people have stuck around. And of those 15, what we did was, here's where some of the challenges have come in that I'll talk about. But essentially what they did was we created our own workshops with PowerPoints and all the rest of it, because of course the pandemic hit, right? And so in the midst of that, once we had built all our workshops, bam, we got hit with the pandemic. So then we had to switch and put the information, the way that we were doing it, like on PowerPoint, so we could do it on Zoom like this, right? And so that was one of our challenges, was just the fact that we had to adjust to a different format. So what happens is, now that those missional coaches are trained and have practiced the workshops and so on, and we've done a few online, a number online, and a few in churches now too, now that we're starting to get back in. Now that's where some of the challenges have arisen. So does that make sense? Does that answer your question though, as to how we can progress?
So I think you're saying there has to be some preparation before you start going into workshops. Yeah.
Oh,
Lucy, you had your hand up.
Yeah, but Pierre, did you go through your diocesan first? Did a presentation to the diocesan and let them know what you're going to be doing?
Yeah, so I work at the diocesan office, and our bishop wanted a focus on mission, and so we discussed a number of ways to do that. And then I had a conversation with Judy, who led these and who has done them multiple times in Ontario.
Mm-hmm.
And then she said, why don't I come down? And I discussed it with Bishop Greg and so on. And so she actually came to our diocesan council retreat, I think. And she talked to us about it, talked to us about just mission generally, talked a little bit about our coaches. And so it was a bit of a, it was a bit of a kind of a, I don't think there was convincing happening, Lucy, but there was definitely some conversation prior. And I basically just said to Bishop Greg, like, if we trained coaches, we could do those workshops here. I asked Judy if she was willing. She came down. We did a lot of it online. So she did the first session herself. And then she had coaches from each that are kind of, that have enjoyed one of those particular workshops, right? That they've liked. And then they came and talked about their workshops, but they did it online like this. So it was kind of a hybrid thing. And yeah, and then our coaches went and did that. So prior to doing the training of the coaches in Calgary, there was some conversation, but there was already an intention to kind of do that. And when I suggested, hey, like, can I start this? Can we train some coaches? Yeah, it was
so you had them on board. Then the next step, did you send invitations to all the parishes, or did you put it in a newsletter? How did you get the churches?
No, I handpicked people that I wanted to come be coaches.
No, I mean, you pick your coaches, but how did you get the other people to come in? Did you send out invitation to the parishes to get people for the workshop, inviting them to the workshop, or?
Oh, I see. Once we had the coaches all trained, is that what you mean?
Mhm.
Yeah. So we started in the pandemic with online ones. So we just advertised in the newsletter. We sent out emails to wardens and, and said, hey, we've got this workshop and you have to register, right? We said, because there was a little piece of homework beforehand, right? Like one little sheet.
Right.
And so yeah, that's how we did the first ones. We just kind of sent out a notice and said, this is available. We did the personal sharing of faith a couple of times. We did communication a couple of times online. And now we have every single workshop. We have slide decks, right? So we have a PowerPoint for every single workshop, and we've made adjustments along the way. So we learned that we couldn't really give the full week-long training to everybody, obviously, but we also understood that people needed to understand the foundation of why missional communication is important, why missional small groups are important, right? Why is this even an issue? And so we went along and tweaked the workshops here and there to say, okay, this is, we need this little piece of explanation at the beginning. And then we created a truncated, a much shorter intro workshop. We call it Foundations, is what we've called it. So those are some of the things we've adjusted, Lucy, along the way. But initially, when we tried to do the workshops online like this, we essentially just invited people and said, this is the one we're going to do. And if you want to come along.
When you talk about picking a handful of people, how big was a handful?
So picking a handful of people like to train as coaches.
Yeah. How many did you initially?
I picked 30. I picked
30.
30 people. I tried to pick people from every angle of the diocese. So we have a pretty geographically wide and long diocese. And so I tried to pick 2 or 3 people from the north, some people from the center, some people from the south. So I chose geographically. So I did, but I did handpick 30 people. And I mean, I passed them by other people, right? I wasn't just sort of, but again, I wanted lay and clergy. I want it because if clergy are not buying into this, that's going to be one of your problems.
Right.
I see Colin has a hand up.
Yeah, Colin, go ahead.
Well, just I guess how long did it take to get the coaches ready?
Originally, it was a week-long training, so it was Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Yeah.
In terms of building workshops, that took probably another 3-4 days in terms of getting together and just working all that out. And because we worked as a team, like we wanted to make sure we were always together. So we didn't silo people out and say, you go build that workshop. No, we did it together. We kept it the same. Every workshop looks the same. Every single workshop looks the same, except for a different scripture, different topic. But the programming, the way that it's laid out is exactly the same.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So you had the ability to have a trained coach come out and train your coaches, right? Would we have that ability here? Because no one's trained here.
Sure.
I wouldn't even know where to start.
Right. So what I would suggest, and I should say there is a few things that, and we could discuss them at a time, I guess, but there's a few things that I think are important to remember in terms of what challenges have arisen. They're not going to be the same for you, obviously, as that would have been for us, but there's a few things that helped us to get through them. And that is partly that when we built the team, I was very, very conscious of all of us being prayerful, always being prayerful the whole way through. There was a few times at the beginning of the pandemic when we didn't know what to do, but we would gather like this online and just pray for each other. And we would just be like, I don't know what to do. So let's just find out how everyone's doing. pray for each other, and then move on. And then at some point, that built the kind of relationships that now when someone says, oh, well, should we do this, or can we do this, or can you do that? You know, there is none of that sort of funny tension that can happen, right? Because we all really understand that no, we're all here for the best of everything, right? And everyone's willing to listen to everyone's thoughts. And so it's a really healthy group, but we worked really hard at that, Colin. I would suggest to you in terms of starting, I get what you're saying, right? You don't have someone there that's already kind of doing this. That you do something like we did, right? Either invite Judy Paulson or invite me. I'll come and do it. I'll come train a set of coaches.
I was coming to that. I was going to
Yeah,
ask you.
basically. Yeah, no, I don't know. I mean, I could bring another coach with me, possibly, depending, you know, time and all that.
Right.
But essentially, I would recommend you do that, right? Is find someone, myself or Judy or one of our other coaches, David Stagg, is fantastic as well. And so one of us could come out, do that introduction, that foundations one.
Yeah.
And then draw in some of our other coaches, right? Or Judy could draw in hers, whichever you choose. And you know, and then just show, because what we did was we did foundations on Monday. Then we did organizational, then we started doing workshops. So we did 2 workshops every day after that, which is why it was 4 days long. Yeah.
I noticed in your notes, you have a worksheet for your youth where did you send out these worksheets, to the parishes or to the,
Yeah.
it says guideline question for missional team.
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure, I think if what I think you're saying is what I think you're saying, I think what that is it's like a little sheet that we send out prior to all the people attending the workshops. Yeah. So when the training, so if we were to come down and do training for you guys, right, come over and do that, not down, over, then what would happen is all of that stuff, we would just give all of that stuff to you. We would, you know, photocopy it or email it to everybody who was coming to be trained. And so that you would have it all, right? And I'm quite happy, frankly, to share the slide decks we have as well. I don't, you know, we don't have, you know, I think we have a little sticker on it that says Diocese of Calgary, but so what? Take it off and put, you know, the different, right? The different name on it. Because they're the same. It's the same workshop, right? And really all that has to happen is, you know, to continue doing that. Now, part of, yeah. So do you want me to tell you some of the challenges and how we kind of?
Sure. Yes, sure.
Yeah.
That'd be great. Thank you.
The first one, of course, was, we have to build the workshops, because they wanted to go in with some kind of a format, right? So we did it on paper first, in other words, not slide decks. And that was fine. That worked okay. And then the pandemic hit. So then we had a guy on our team that literally works for a tech company. So he was quite happy to help, you know, build the slide decks to make them work. And then we went online. So, I mean, these are just little things. We just overcame each of these little bumps, right? By just adjusting. So, okay, so we can't do them in person. What about doing them online? And by the way, these were not like quick things, right? These sometimes took a few months or longer to sort of go, okay, what do you want to do here? Well, let's build the personal sharing workshop on a slide deck, see what it looks like, practice it together, and then we offered it, right? Then one of the other interesting things, I don't know that this was a challenge, but it was a curious thing that happened, was that as we were giving these workshops on mission, we discovered that there were discipleship questions that were arising. So, for example, we did this is the first one that came up, with personal sharing of faith, right? That was the first one we did. And what happened there was we said, well, what is, you know, think about your story of faith, right? So, you know, in the words of the evangelical world, what's your testimony, right? What is the way that you've experienced God in your life, right? Sort of thing. So what is that story? Well, we were getting a lot of blank stares, and we were all kind of looking at each other like, okay. And so from that, this is it grew into something else. So not specifically missional, but I do think it's a missional task. I taught a class on spiritual autobiography. So I have a DMin in spiritual formation, so that's kind of up my alley, right? So I was like, okay, well, people don't know their story, then let's help them write it. Let's help them engage it and write it. So I ran, I don't know, I think 3 or 4 different workshops separate from the missional coaches. But because that was a discipleship tool, right? So I thought, okay, they're not actually understanding even their own story, how to express it. So here's one way we can do that. So that's one thing that happened because of the missional workshops, right? We discovered that there was things like it's in the foundational workshop. There's a slide we have that says that some of the things that keep us from sharing our faith are things like, the messages we've seen out there, right? The hellfire and brimstone kind of things, or the way that evangelism has been approached to us, the ways that we've experienced, the ways we've like, oh dear, right? Sort of turns you off. And then there's also another reason, and that is, I'm not sure that I believe Jesus is the bread of life, right? And so that's a real thing. And so those are the moments too, that when they arise, it's not the coaches have to answer those kinds of, questions about, well, what about this? And what about this discrepancy in scripture that they see or whatever, right? I don't think I think that's one of those little hiccup things that you think, oh dear. And as a clergy person, right, I'm tempted to start, babbling on about something that I think might be helpful. But frankly, it's not, right?
So
A lot of times,
weren't there also things about personal boundaries that sort of sharing this is going beyond my boundaries? I don't want to share this.
sorry, I don't know what you mean.
People's reluctance to tell their stories is because that's personal, sort of thing.
Oh, for sure. And that's
Yeah.
the kind of thing we discuss in that foundational workshop. Yeah, for sure. We've got some hesitation there culturally. We have some, yeah. And Anglicans, right? We love to live in our heads. But I always remind everyone we have to love God with all our soul, heart, and strength, not just our mind, right?
Yeah.
It is actually all encompassing faith. And so sometimes, in terms of the things that we bump over, I think for us, what we came to was, that's a really interesting question about this. And I wonder if it would be helpful for you to talk to your own clergy person about that, or if you would suggest a way in which it might be helpful to have a conversation about that at another time or a different place or whatever. So it was more about helping them know that there are ways to answer the questions they have. But most people don't talk about their fear of not believing enough. Most of them don't talk about it. We found that when they heard all the information, they felt better about, oh, I don't actually have to know all the answers to people's questions if they end up coming through the doors, right? Or if I meet them on the street and they say, why do you believe in Jesus? Right? You don't have to have all the perfect theological answers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the kind of way we learned to not give prescriptive answers to things, but to help people explore their own faith. That was an interesting step for us, right? To not get embroiled in it, sort of thing, if that makes sense.
And this is where I think this worksheet would work, because if we give this worksheet out with the
Yep.
questions and the answers, you would know exactly how to approach people, because
Yep.
they give this back.
Exactly, Lucy, and you have a better idea of who you're dealing with when they come, right? So when they come, like when we did the training for the original set of coaches, right? Not the workshops. The training portion, we did those too. We filled those sheets out as well to see where we were at, right? And it's not a judgment thing. It's just to say, hey, like, this is where I am, right? I'm not actually comfortable. Like, and I will say, evangelism does not come easily to me. Pilar Gateman, me, I'm talking about myself. It doesn't come easily to me. Now, I realize though that creating a hospitable atmosphere for other people does come easily to me, right? And when you do that, people become more comfortable to ask you, so why do you think that? And then it becomes not me pursuing someone, but actually just living in a way that they are interested in what's happening. right? So there's a there's ways of being missional without having to stand in front with a placard, yelling at people on the street corner. Right? The other thing, there's a lot of other ways. The other thing that I think was a challenge was clergy. I think that sometimes we see these things, right, coming into us from other places, and we are. I want to be careful how I say this because I think there is a sort of a level of feeling threatened by it, like, oh, I should be doing this, or we feel like we're supposed to have answers to things, right? People come to us, they say things, and we feel like we're supposed to be able to respond with something that's going to be helpful. And because Anglicans love to live here, right, in our heads, we often think those things are theological answers. And so sometimes, not always, and not the majority, but there is times when clergy can sort of feel like they're resisting you, right? Well, yeah, okay, I'll teach my people how to be missional. Like, okay, that's fine. You're more than welcome to teach your people how to be missional. How's that working for you? And so it's interesting, but what I have said to clergy is I have said, listen, you probably have so much going on in your life, right? Don't they all? You probably don't have a lot of extra time, right, to be focusing on this particular piece. Why don't you just let us whet their appetite? Maybe it would loosen your load a little, right? Like maybe this might lighten your the weight of the tasks that you have in front of you, right? Let us help you with this, right? And there's been some positive response to that, but I think that clergy often feel themselves to be the shepherd of, which is appropriate, right? The shepherd of their parishes, and so they want to sort of guard against, stuff. And a lot of times, what happens is people will come in, right, with a workshop, and then they all look to the clergy person and go, "So what are we doing?" Right? And so what we want to do is say, no, this is about empowering your people to be the people of God, right? And we just want to help them do that. So if you're open to that, great. If not, that's good too, right? That's fine. So the way that we got around some of that is we offered diocesan workshops, right? So we offered them from the diocese. And so we just created a lot of the online stuff we did from the diocesan account and stuff.
And also, our Bishop Jeff is very receptive to lay leadership in the diocese.
Sure. So yeah. So so that's one of the other ones. I was trying to think. There was one other sort of challenging thing, but I'm trying to remember what it is now. Oh, I know what it was. We at one point, and maybe there's other things that would arise as I thought about it. But anyway, one of the other things that happened was the coaches themselves, when the pandemic kind of was done, there was a lot of sort of nervousness about feeling like they weren't prepared, even though they'd done all this work, right? And now part of that might just be the function of the way we were all cooped up and, like, oh gosh, I gotta go see people. Like, how do I do this? Some of them felt like, well, we're concerned, like, what if they ask us questions, which is an actual, like, it's a real concern, right? Like, what if they ask us things and we don't remember the stats? So what? My answer was, so what? Who cares? The whole point of the workshop is that at the end, you have helped people that are thinking this way about what evangelism and mission and stuff looks like, and shifted their mindset. That's if you got nothing else from today, and I say this to people when I do workshops all the time, I say, if you get nothing else out of today, if the scripture doesn't speak to you, if the stats don't talk to you, if nothing else works, remember that missional life in a parish is about mindset. It's about how do we see the things we are already doing in a missional way. You do not have to create a bunch of programs. That is not the point of this. You simply have to think about what you're already doing and wonder, we already do a bulletin. What would it look like if the bulletin was assuming that there were seekers present? Right? What would it look like if our website assumed that people that have never been to church were reading it? What would it look like? Right? So just the little that mindset. I've even heard there's a few bishops actually that are good at preaching, assuming that mindset, right? They're always assuming, even in the church, that there's someone there who's not totally convinced of this, right? I'm not sure I believe this stuff. And so they're not trying to convince them. They're just trying to say, this is, I know you're there. I know you're there. I recognize that you're there. And I was there once too, right? So there's some folks that sort of make that assumption as they preach, as they talk, yeah, in all their communication. And I'm using that just, that's one of the workshops. But the whole point is that you shift the way you think about something, not necessarily add a program, add a bunch of work. Does that make sense? And that's a selling feature to clergy. Right.
And this is very much my mindset that I bring to anything that the people that I need to talk to are the people that are on the fence.
Yeah.
And what are their concerns? And
yeah.
what do we have in common?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah. Yeah. So that's kind of how we did it. And are you guys all, you're not all in the same town, are you? Or the same city?
No.
No.
I didn't think so.
Well, mostly, but Lynn is in Ontario.
Hey, okay.
Yeah.
5 of us here are in town.
Well, let me, there's one thing that's been on my mind as you were talking. I want to play the pessimist role.
Sure.
A little bit. Now, I remember there was some clergy conference that our Bishop Jeff wanted to put on, and he found that he couldn't get the clergy participating unless he made it mandatory, which he did, and then even not all of them participated. And one of my initial concerns that I raised at the beginning of this session is that I'm a little worried this is going to be like pulling teeth. I'm a little worried about setting up a workshop and only 3 people show up.
Sure.
Now, you said you dealt with that by having your hand-picked group of people and went to each of them and sort of got a commitment from them.
So what I did was commit to the week, right? I said to them, if I could get you to come and just do this week of training. And there was some so the most important training of the week is that first day. Although, once you start to see how the workshops are all similarly patterned, it wouldn't be required. Like, if everybody couldn't come Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I think that would be fine. But it would be great if people could see that original workshop, that foundations part, and then maybe 1 or 2 workshops to say, this is how they all go, right? This is how every single one of them is formatted. So yes, you're right, Gary. You're always going to have attrition, right? For a variety of reasons. So I invited 30, not even maybe 35. I invited the diocesan staff. I invited, they came to day 1. They didn't come to the rest of them. I invited sort of not quite half and half, but half clergy, half lay, probably more lay than clergy, to be honest. Probably maybe, 2/3, a third, something like that. But I specifically chose people for whom I believed this would be something that they were interested in, encouraged by, right? That kind of thing, right? I didn't make anybody sign up for anything. What I said was, would you just come, see what's going on? And at the end of the week, I said to everybody who was still there, we would really like to build a team of coaches like the people you've seen presenting here today. And I'm going to invite you to think about that. And if you would like to, what it would mean is that we would do these workshops in the diocese, and we would ask that you would be part of a team together, that we would build these workshops, etc. And I think we probably had half of them, a little more than half, say, yep, I'm good. Here's the thing though, I don't think that's failure. Because what happened there was whoever came still heard the message.
Yes.
Right? They were still interested. They were still curious. They were still enough to make them think about it. But it's like the seed scattering, right?
Yeah.
Some of the seeds lands on rock. Some of it lands on fertile soil. Some of it lands, some of it sprouts, some of it doesn't. right? And it's not our job to ensure that it's perfect. Our job is just to cast the seeds, right?
Right, yeah.
And so that's what I did. I just cast the seeds. And then over time, we've had some missional coaches that stayed the whole time. We've had some that have petered away sickness, right? One of them moved out of the province, right? So there's normal attrition too, right? It isn't just resistance, Gary, I guess is what I'm getting at, right? It's not just sort of fear of commitment or something. It is actually that, people's lives change. They get sick, their family members die, right? They
Right,
move.
yeah.
And so there's an element of that that's just naturally going to happen. So my suggestion, take it for what it's worth, for what you're paying for it. But my suggestion would be that if you want to do this training, you hand pick a good number of people, knowing that you're going to end up with this many, right? Knowing that that's just natural and that's okay, right? So you start with whatever 30, and you say, okay, I'm going to end up with maybe 10 or 12, right? And
So
yeah,
just how did you set it up with people? Because I'm thinking with our diocese, like, no one is even aware of this. They haven't got a clue, which is okay. That's not a criticism, but so I assume you were maybe in the same boat, kind of. So how did you set it up with the whole diocese, and like, how did you talk people into coming? What was the maybe there's 2 or 3 steps in there. I don't know, but like, how did you position this whole?
So sorry,
Yeah.
Colin, are you referring to like the original training? Is that what you mean?
Well, I guess just the overall program.
Yeah.
I don't want to call it a program because it's not a program.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
how did you position that with everybody, and then how did you then get people to position the training programs and all that kind of stuff? Because it's just to say you want to come be a listen to this missional training kind of thing is like, I don't know,
Yeah.
like,
Some
it's good, but
some came from curiosity, Colin, for sure. Some of them were just like,
sure.
I don't know what Gateman's up to, but let's go through.
That's
So
what I say about Gary all the time. So
so it's an interesting question, right? I think a lot of what happened was there's always conversation about mission. We need to be more missional, yada yada.
yeah.
What people mean by that is an interesting question to
Yes.
discuss. That could be a whole nother meeting, by the way. What does missional mean?
Yes.
It doesn't necessarily mean filling your pews, right? The goal has to be about helping people to see Jesus, walking alongside someone, right? To take steps towards, cooperating with the Holy Spirit, I think is matter of fact, I think I have the definition here. One of the definition that we use for evangelism, because that's the word that nobody likes, right? Just looking it up, I actually have the slides right here because I'm retweaking them for somebody. Shoot, let me see if I can find it. Okay, so I'll keep looking for this and hopefully I'll speak clearly. One of the things that we did was we just talked to people, right? So I had lots of conversations, a lot of conversations. I did not do it by email, although some of it I said, can we please have a conversation? I'm excited about this idea, right? I wonder if you would come. I wonder if you would just come and listen and give me your feedback, right? So that none of it was like, compelled, right? I wasn't compelling anybody to come. I wasn't particularly, I wasn't demanding anything of them except that they show up. I would feed them lunch. The diocese agreed to pay for that. 3 lunches, I think it was, for 30 people, not a huge amount of money, but still, right? They agreed to do that. They agreed to, the bishop allowed me to take a full week, right? And do the training, right? That was the other thing, because he had to be on board, right?
So you had a missional funding set up a missional what they call what oh, that
Budget.
a budget set
the
up
budget.
called a missional funding.
Not really. That didn't come till later. We now have a budget line item for missional coaches in the diocese. So but that came much later. So it's been 3.5 years, right? So that came much later, Lucy. Essentially what happened was, and Colin, I realize I haven't quite finished answering your question. But I think what I want to say about that is I had enough support from the bishop and, folks in the office, that I said, if I was to do this workshop, we have to pay for Judy's travel, right? And we need to feed these people, right? Judy stayed at my house, so that didn't cost us anything, right? I fed her, that was fine. And basically I went to the Safeway and got those trays of sandwiches and muffins, made coffee at the church that we met at. The church didn't charge us anything. So essentially the original training cost me flying Judy back and forth. And she did come from Ontario, so it was, it's a little bit more expensive than maybe than, and then partly it was, it was really just the food, right? The one thing I would do differently myself in the training is I would make sure there's somebody in charge of just the food and the hospitality, that food piece. Because I tried to do all of that and it's too much. Sorry. So Colin, just to finish answering your question, I think it was conversations with the bishop, right? It was conversations to find out, hey, can we put on this workshop and can we pay for this, right? Bringing this person in, feeding people. Then the other piece was, I did send emails out. So, oh, hey, Colin, I'd like to talk about, hey, Ian, hey, Lynn. And I would send emails out and say, I'd really like to have a conversation. You can imagine 30 people, which took a little while, took a few months. And I spent time just chatting with them and saying, listen, Judy's got this set of workshops that she thinks seem to work really well out there. Are you willing to come and just listen to her and see? I'd love to be able to build a team of missional coaches, right? That we could go do workshops in the diocese. What do you think? You don't have to commit to being a coach. You don't have to commit to leading workshops at all, but I'd love for you to just come. Because I'd appreciate your feedback. I'd appreciate knowing whether or not you think this is viable. And at the end, I managed to get 30 some people there. But again, like I said before, right, this took a lot of conversation and sort of thing. So, yeah.
What was the key thing to say what this is, or why are we doing this?
Yeah.
Why? I think that's kind of what I'm trying to wrap my head around. Once they're there, I think that it's pretty. You sounds like you've developed a great process, and that's good for you guys. That's great. But why did you start it in the first place?
Matthew 28. Right? Go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of God, right? I mean, really, fundamentally, it's the Great Commission, right? That's what we're actually asked to do as Christians, right? But we've kind of lost our, I don't want to say, well, maybe chutzpah is the right word, right? We've kind of lost our sense of the fact that this is the best news ever. This is the best news ever, right? And I think that along the way, we've been so worried about what do people think about this, and we have to make people, think this way or that way or whatever, that we've forgotten that it's the best news in the world, right? And yeah, so that's why. I mean, one of the dangers, Colin, is that people come to sort of the missional idea or evangelism or whatever, and they say things like, oh, good, this will fill our pews. It might.
That's not the purpose, no, yeah.
But it's not the reason to do it, because Jesus didn't say go and make pew fillers.
No.
He said go and make disciples. So one of the cautions that I would give is that if the idea is and I know we talked about these churches that are kind of getting together or whatever, and I get that. It's a reality. It's a painful one. I have had to go to too many church closures in my time at the office. Not fun. It's heartbreaking. But to pretend that that you can just plug this thing in and that suddenly people will start showing up at St. Swithin's is also not true, right? People follow Jesus not because he's a nice building and good PowerPoint, right? They followed him because something was different about this guy, right? And their lives were changed because of him. So I know that's a bit of a theological answer, Colin, but
that's okay. Yeah.
I think.
And Gary, it kind of fits in, just listening to the charge that the bishop gave at synod last month to go forth and be disciples, right? And
there were
right?
two parts. There were two parts to the bishop charge. Also, the context is my jurisdiction or responsibility is stewardship, and our first definition of stewardship was making disciples.
Yeah.
And then the bishop's charge to the synod, two of the part, there's a four part, but I focus on two of them. One was to reach out and one was to reach in.
Yeah.
The reach out part is to reach out to the community and become church in the community.
Yeah.
And the reach in part is to reach into your parishioners and discern what their callings are and discern how they can help with the reach out part.
Yeah.
I wonder.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I think, Ian, there's something going on in the back of your screen.
Yeah.
I wonder
if you mute.
We need to mute if you're not speaking,
okay.
I think.
All right.
It sounds like maybe someone has a radio on in the background or something.
Yeah. Oh, you don't have to turn your screen off, Ian, just your sound.
No, I'll come back in. I go right out to do that.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I'm changing the subject here. Maybe I shouldn't. Well, one of the things you mentioned was your sort of personal workload in this, which sounds like it was very high. Now, I'm a person who is totally dedicated to my church, and I'm willing to do a lot of work for my church, but I'm afraid of the burden all falling on my shoulders. And
that's the worry that the clergy have about these workshops. Gary, are you the host of this meeting?
yes, I am.
Can you mute Ian?
Okay.
Because I think I know what's happening. If you just go to his square.
Let me try again. Okay, here.
There we go. Perfect. I think what's happening, Ian, just out of having done a lot of Zoom meetings, I think what's happening is, for whatever reason, our voices are reverberating back. I don't know if it's the volume. I never can quite figure out why that happens, but I think that's what it is. Sorry. It's just hard to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I was a kid, there was this lady that goes around to all the different churches. She was a missionary, and she would ask if the kids would come out, and she would teach them to act as like be an actor. But what she wanted was to teach us to be missionaries, students. She would give us part of the Bible to read, and then she would form like a acting school, and we would act out the part, and it was very good because she helped us to understand the meaning of different parts of the Bible, and get us to be interested in being in Sunday school. And she didn't used to go to just one denomination. She go to all the denomination and ask for the kids to come to be actors. She tell them that we were supposed to be actors, but we were being acting out the parts in the Bible. And because of that, all the churches had lots of kids in their churches in Sunday school. We all conform, we baptize, we conform, and we go out to do different things in the church, like and the bishop at that time, and the Anglican bishop used to keep we go out on a retreat in the outer skirt of the country, and we would be there where we have nothing that you would have in the city. And we were there for about a couple weeks, and all we would be doing is studying the Bible and acting out the parts and loving each other. And I find that was, because I grew up like that, I very much interested in the church. I involved in the church all the time because I grew up like that. And that was, we always had children. Ian would tell you, we always had children in Sunday schools, lots of kids.
Lynn, you have to unmute. Yeah.
Sorry about that. I find this very interesting. I'm very interested in taking further what we are doing and then bringing it back to the church. One of the things I've noticed, though, as the years have gone by, when I was a kid, we went to church. Every good kid went to church, and you had Sunday school, and then you had the groups like CGIT and things like that you went on in. With CGIT is Christian Girls in Training under the leadership of Jesus.
Yeah.
And I can remember going to the United Church and being there for years, just taking part in those things and how much we enjoyed them. There doesn't seem to be that thing. There's no summer camps anymore. There's nothing to draw the kids in. And when we had all of that stuff, that's when the kids were here. Like, they couldn't wait for summer camp. And that 2 weeks at camp, they learned so much and everything. Now, when you go to church, and I've noticed this, even with the adults, they sit there like this.
And Lynn, some of what you're saying, there's some really good research and history behind that, and how those changes have happened. That's the foundational workshop. So what you're talking about now, it is very true. It's very different now than it was 50 years ago, right? Like we all experience church in a very different way. There's some really good reasons for that. Some of it is what you've said. And some of it is cultural. Some of it is the way in which the church has changed and morphed over time. Some of it is socioeconomic stuff. Like, there's some interesting things that I think these are the kinds of questions that get answered in that first foundational workshop, because it is especially in the training, because in the training week, that it's almost the whole day that's spent on that undergirding foundational stuff. And it's so it's really good at answering some of the things that you're exactly saying, Lynn.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm very interested in the workshops. The unfortunate thing for me is I live in Ontario. I can't guarantee I can get to Winnipeg because of weather, snow, road conditions, and all
we
the other stuff.
did a hybrid. So even well before the pandemic, right? She came in, like Judy came in by herself. She didn't bring all the coaches in. She just came in by herself, did day one all on her own. And then she had the coaches come in through Zoom and present their workshop. And then she would supplement as they did that. So that's one way to do it. And you could just have a Zoom meeting like this happening, projecting what was seen in the room. I mean, it's technology stuff, but it's doable. It's still doable.
Now, I want to change course a bit because we've gone over the hour, and I think we have to get back to one of my first questions is, given what you know about us and what we're trying to do, what is our very first step?
Well, I'd call up, it's Bishop Jeff, right? I would call him up and say, hey, Pilar is willing to come down and train some coaches. Are you willing to, can you find somehow to get her over here? I'll sleep on one of your couches. I don't care. And do this training. I think that would be the first thing is he willing to support that with, to put some, I don't mean to mean this in a bad way, but put some money where his mouth is. If he believes in mission, then is he willing to find some way to support it? Even just this training piece, right? It doesn't have to cost a lot. That would be the first thing I'd say is make sure the bishop's on side. Then the second thing I would say is, if he is on side, then get his suggestion for people that are both clergy and lay that he would recommend you approaching to come to the training.
Mhm.
Yeah. And then start building that list, start talking to people about joining together in that and just making an open invitation, right? Not having to say, oh, if you come to this, you have to do this many workshops, because then no one's going to do that. We're all tired. You know what I mean? Like, we've all got too much to do. So the first thing I would say is sell the bishop the idea.
Mhm.
I don't think you'd have to sell, but and then and then start gathering some people. And then if you want me to come do it, then let's pick a time. Pick a week that I can come down and or one of my other coaches. I've got a couple of really good coaches here that
Yeah.
if they could go, right? Yeah. And there could be, I mean, if finances are an issue, you could let us know. We could probably figure out a way to
How to
work
do that. Yeah.
something
Yeah.
out.
Okay, yeah, it's a matter of working those things out.
Yeah.
That was my idea too. Speak to the bishop, and then maybe, because we have both priests and lay people at the diocesan council, maybe I don't know much of them, because this is only my third year, and we did most of our meetings on Zoom in the first term because of the COVID. So I know them by face, but not, personally. Maybe see if it is doable that we have it on our agenda at our next diocesan meeting, and see if we can get people to volunteer to be coaches.
Okay.
Well, maybe if you know them, then you
I
can
wouldn't do
approach
that.
them.
I think we need to approach people.
Well, if you know them, then you approach them. I don't
Well,
really
I
know
think,
them.
yeah, because just to throw it up for volunteers is,
Mhm.
Well, I like to approach people similar to what Pilar was saying. I like to approach people
Mhm.
saying, I need your advice.
Mhm.
Can we talk about that? Can we meet about that and maybe get a few people together who can give me advice? And then it
Well,
doesn't feel like they're jumping in the deep end so much. It feels
no,
like they're easing into it.
yeah.
I wouldn't ask for their advice. I would say, well, we're planning on training some missional people as missional coaches. Would you mind? Would you mind
Well,
volunteering, or would you mind?
I think,
What do you think about
I think,
being a missional coach?
I think we're getting into specifics right now.
Yeah, true.
And I think that's a different subject, because it's how, because you've got it, you just can't go to a person and say, do you want to become a missional coach, without first of all talking to people about what we're thinking about, what the concept is, how it works and all that. And then I think we gather their feedback on that and their thoughts on that, and that's how I would, but I think that's good for discussion within
I
the
didn't
group.
mean just
Yeah,
asking them to be a missional coach. What
no,
do you think
yeah,
about
Okay.
being a missional
yeah.
coach?
So I'm
Yeah.
going to do two things. I'm going to, for one thing, send this video out to all of you, and it won't go beyond us.
Mm.
It's a private meeting, private video. It'll be on YouTube, but nobody will know where it is, so it'll be private.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to compose an email to Jeff saying we want to have a chat, and here's what we're going to chat about. And then maybe me and Colin would be a good sort of group of people to have a chat with them.
I think, Gary, I think it's possible that sorry, the lady who has Good Shepherd on her thing,
Yes,
I don't know
she's
your
trying to
name.
say
And also
something.
Ian was gonna ask something, I think. I noticed.
Oh, yes,
Oh,
thank you.
hi, thanks. It's Jennifer. Yeah,
Jennifer,
I should
sorry.
change that sometime. It's church account. Yeah, so, but just to concur, I think, I appreciate what you said, Pilar, and that if this is to be a diocesan undertaking, not a program, for sure, we need our bishop on board. I don't see any difficulty with that. Given he's stated plainly, like Gary mentioned, in his charge to synod, that discipleship and knowing our story, our personal stories, like you were speaking of, that's going to be his focus. So, you know, how we frame that, like the language we use is, I think, something that's going to have to be looked at. That word missional is such a crazy word. I think for a lot of people, you know, it means a whole pile of things, or it means nothing. Like, and we have done work in this diocese with in that area with Craig Van Gelder and Ellen Roxburgh over the years. So it cannot be, I think, like you said, a programmatic laying on.
No.
It's simply, that's not what it is. This is what our nature is, or it's as church. But we really have lost that. And I think it comes out of our sense of discipleship, right? It's our response to that. So yeah, I would just say conversation with Jeff, and bringing him, asking him to help identify those whom could potentially lead folks in this way, would be, yeah, the way to go. So I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Pierre sent us these
haven't
two.
heard from Ian yet.
She
Yes,
sent
that-
us these two.
One second, Lucy.
Mhm.
That in order to feel out who you send as leaders, the survey would help you quite a bit. That little survey sheet that you send out,
Yeah.
it will help you identify people in addition to what you know about them. So there you got some guidelines. And then on Colin's question that he asked earlier regarding what you'll tell people when they get there, I think they should have a fair idea as to what they're getting into before they show up. Yeah. So you give them enough information.
Thank
One
you.
other thing, if I can add just one other thought, which you can take or leave, feel free to ignore it, is one thing that happened in our diocese is Judy came and talked to diocesan council, but she did a retreat, right? So she was there for 2 full days talking about mission, and what she had done. Now, I don't know, I mean, you guys, you know, I don't think that's required. I think that was kind of an extra piece, really. But if it's, the problem is that, you know, most diocesan councils have an agenda this long, right? And so to try to fit in even what we've done here, it's taken us an hour and 15 minutes, and I've barely touched the surface, right? So, you know, so I don't know, like, unless you were going to do something like that, that might not be, but the other piece around that is whoever you're inviting, as many of you as can come as possible. If each of you, so there's one, Lynn, I know you're in Ontario, but even if Lucy and Jennifer, Ian, Colin, right? If the 5 of you even invite 3 people each, right? You've now got 15 already, the bishop recommend, right? So it's not actually probably as onerous a task as you think, right? Like you probably because of your roles in the diocese, you probably know, you know, a fair number of people in your own parishes. And I would say, listen, we'd love for you to be a coach. We think you have gifts. However, what we're really curious about is to come and listen to these workshops and pay attention and let us know what you think about what might be next, because then they're invested, right? And then even if they don't become a coach, at least you have people who have listened, heard it, and are open now when a missional coach does show up at their church, right? So there's I think you're right, Colin and Lucy and Ian and all of you, like the ways to do that. It might even look different with each of you, but to keep it as open as possible and to say, hey, we'd love for you to be a coach. We think you're really gifted, but what I'm more interested in is your feedback in coming to this workshop and doing this.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Thank you.
Yeah, if all of you could study this missional footprint that Pierre sent us and the mission. It's quite interesting. I was thinking when I read it all through, I was thinking just take out Calgary and put Winnipeg.
Yeah, you're welcome to take whatever you want. We're not holding copyright.
Because it's answer all the questions about missional.
So just so you know, Lucy, that missional footprint that you have, that was my attempt before the missional coaches were trained, actually. That was my attempt to add to the diocesan record keeping. So you know the annual
Mm.
returns that we expect
Right,
from
yes,
people
yeah.
here in churches? So we added that to the annual returns, and then we reduced the other pieces of information. So we added that piece about mission, and then we added adult baptisms. And when you do the workshops, you'll see why.
Mhm.
Adult baptisms and adult confirmations to that. You know, the thing is how many baptisms, how
Right,
many.
yeah.
So we added those two pieces there, and then we tried our very best to reduce all the other reporting as much as possible to what was only necessary. But that's because I happened to work at the diocesan office, and I kept sort of picking away and
Okay.
saying, you know, and so I changed it, took it to council and said, what do you think of this? And they're like, sure.
Mm.
So that's just so you know, that's what that missional footprint is, though. It's actually an annual report that churches are asked to fill out.
I see.
Okay,
Thank you for it.
Uh,
And I like the mission action plan is very interesting too.
yeah. Okay, this has been very valuable. We local people are going to meet again on Tuesday. Oh, okay. Lynn has another comment.
I don't have a comment, but I'd like Pilar to send me that information again. Somehow I've lost it on my computer somewhere. I tried to store it.
I could forward it to you, Lynn.
If you wouldn't
I've got
mind,
it in my
Lucy.
computer.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
just forward it to me. I greatly appreciate it.
Okay, thank
For
you.
sure. Well, lovely
Okay.
to meet with you all. Thank you.
Yes.
And thanks for coming.
Thanks,
And
yeah.
we hope to see you
Thank you for
again
coming.
to do the
Yeah.
first workshop for
Okay.
us.
All right, take
Okay,
care, everyone.
bye-bye.
God bless.
Okay, bye.
I'll be ending
Bye.
it now.